Accountant is probably costing you money, mate. And not because they're doing a bad job at anything like this, because their job isn't what you actually think it is. If you're running an international business, right, and you're relying on domestic accounting for offshore advice, you're probably making a massive mistake. And in this video, I'm going to explain exactly why that is. Okay, so I'm Will Hodgson, co-founder of HPT Group. We help entrepreneurs, business owners, and high net worth individuals structure their companies and lives internationally in a very custom, unique, tailored solution to every client's case by case. Again, this is with entities, banking, tax residency, asset protection. It's all completely different. We've had such diverse cases. I have to explain this to you guys. I work with clients across dozens of jurisdictions, and almost every week I see a fallout from bad advice, which is really, really annoying. For our team especially, you know, we have to work with other accountants as well, and we're like, hang on a second, you're saying this, the client has been doing this for 3 bloody years, you know, because they're such small-minded on their domestic little relationships. You know, this is not malicious advice, it's, you know, not incompetent advice, it's just advice from professionals who are operating outside of expertise, essentially speaking. So let me explain what is going on and what you should do about it. So let's be fair to accountants. A good domestic accountant is completely valuable. If they handle your tax returns, they keep you compliant with local regulations, manage your bookkeeping, advice on, for example, in the UK, allowed expenses, help with payroll. Again, we have to use accountants for this as well. For some of our clients, you know, and we can obviously refer you to some great ones who know how to do their job properly, but that's their job, and most of them do it very well. But here's the thing. They're trained in one jurisdiction, okay? A UK accountant knows UK tax law, a US CPA knows US tax code, and an Australian accountant knows Australian rules. You know, that's what they've studied, that's what they practice, and that's their expertise. Our expertise and how we help clients is global, if that makes sense, and that's why we work with so many different parties around the world to find a custom right solution for you. And if you did want to become a client, hpt.group/apply, the link is the first link in the description, okay? So the moment you introduce an offshore company to an offshore company, a foreign bank account, income from multiple countries, residency in a different jurisdiction, they've completely stepped outside their training, and that's why I want to make this video here today. They might not tell you that, but they might not even realize it, if that makes sense. But you're now asking them questions they're not equipped to answer, okay? So when domestic accountants advise on international structures, or, you know, a bad advice usually falls into 2 categories. First is they're overly cautious, they don't understand the structures. And second, I would say, is, you know, well, I've had clients who have been told by their accountants they couldn't have an offshore company, full stop, and just fear, okay? These clients were leaving hundreds and hundreds of thousands of tax savings on the table because their accountant didn't understand the bloody rules, okay? The second is dangerously uninformed. The accountant doesn't know what they know. They say yes to things they shouldn't. You know, simple expenses in the UK, I've seen on client, I'm like, Jesus Christ, I would not be putting that through my UK accounts, if that makes sense. They don't mention substance requirements, they miss reporting obligations. This is worse than you think, because you think you're compliant when you're not, you know, and you're building a foundation that will essentially collapse if it's ever found out, okay? So real examples I've seen, you know, I'm gonna have to change the names, you know, be careful not to mention the names, right? But this is ones I've personally encountered. A client was based in the UK, a very recent one actually, and basically his accountant set up a US LLC for him, for his consulting business. Now the accountant had heard that US LLCs aren't taxed in the US, which is true for non-residents, but I don't know how a UK accountant could advise this and set up a US LLC for a UK resident. It's just completely ridiculous, you know. This is UK corporation tax written all over it, and they were not doing it, okay. The structure achieved nothing except additional filing with US filings, which are a nightmare, right, if you've dealt with US LLCs before, and additional complexity, you know. I've had other clients who basically told them to set up a BVI company while living in the Netherlands. There's a client who went to another consultant before me. I was like, well, you live in the Netherlands, mate. You sure? And he went ahead with it, but I was just like, well, I wouldn't be doing that one myself, if that makes sense. Another client was living in Dubai like 60 days a year and spending the rest in the UK. And the accountant said it was fine for their UAE company is making their, you know, effective choices in UAE. I don't think it is, mate, you know. This client was a woman. She spent her whole life in the UK. She had properties in the UAE. A lot of the money, I would be very skeptical, you know, of some of the stuff I've saw, it was completely ridiculous, you know. I really can't go into it too much because I'm just going to end up saying the name and have to edit the video. I don't want to do that, you know. So the thing is, why does this keep happening, And Matt's first, accountants are very generalists, Most small businesses, accountants handle everything. Personal tax, corporate tax, VAT, payroll, XYZ. Again, they're very good at doing this. But when it comes to international business and advising them, hey, my friend is a US LLC, can I do that? They may say, yeah, sure, or no, you cannot, There's more of a story to it that they have to be explaining, And most general practitioners in tax, they don't have time for their deep expertise looking at position of economic management in UAE, for example, which we spend most our lives looking at, as obviously a lot of our clients are in Dubai, okay? Second, there's no clear boundary. When a client asks their accountant for an international question, typically speaking, the UK accountant, in a prime example of what we've dealt with, is literally straight out of their depth, and that's why they either reject it or give false advice, okay? Thirdly, clients don't trust their accountants. You've worked with someone for years, they've always been reliable, and you assume they know what they're talking about. Now, when you ask them a question, you just be honest to the accountant. Do you know about this, or should I go to somebody else? That's a better way to approach this situation. It doesn't bother me, whatever. Just please tell me the straight answer. And a lot of accountants simply reply with, "I don't know." It's no yes, it's no no. And that's probably the best answer, but it sometimes leaves the client in the dark a little bit, if that makes sense. So what you actually need, if you are going international, your business is international, right? Which, to be honest, nowadays, we only see really international businesses, It's apart from the occasional case, which we're like, I'm sorry, we can't have you as a client. Just stay with your current parties, stay living in the UK, your business is UK, that's our best advice we could give, right? But you need specialists, not generalists. International tax planning requires someone who does this every single day. Again, someone who understands multiple jurisdictions, how they interact, and what traps there are, very key there. I've fallen into traps myself in Thailand. Cost me a nightmare. But again, I've learned the lesson. I can share these lessons with you guys, okay? So this might be an international tax lawyer, multiple legal advisors, a general counsel, cross-border tax advisor, or a firm like ours that essentially connects you with all the parties needed and is very tailored and custom to the client. We just serve the client with no conflicts of interest, okay? So you need someone who actually serves both sides, if that makes sense. It's not enough, you need to know UAE, international this, international that, banking now, compliance, completely different ballgame, So you need someone who's actually worked on all ends of the spectrum with part legal counsels in fund management, legal counsels in Guernsey, legal counsels in Isle of Man, legal counsels in the UK, the Netherlands. Here, we have these on our phone books. I can literally WhatsApp them 5 times a day and do every day because we're pretty much quite busy, actually. So you need coordination. A domestic accountant still has a really important part in your structure, especially if it's a great one. Handling your local compliance, your old stuff, this, X, Y, Z, managing the numbers. But they need to work alongside your international advisor, especially if you're living in UAE and you still have UK operations, okay? They need to be together in group chats, and this is how it should be done in an informal but formal setting, if that makes sense, where we can really chat our true, questions to them. Hey, what about this? What about this? But what do you think about this, And really present them in different types of situations, and you can really learn the values of each party at play. And that's why obviously we can charge nice consulting fees because we give a lot of value at play, right? So you need honesty. Good advisors will tell you something that isn't in the area. They refer it out or admit something with uncertainty. You just need an honesty and say, hey, you cannot do that. Or in my opinion, I would not be doing that. We're not professional tax advisors, but we've seen a lot of stuff, okay? And we work alongside a lot of parties that are legal counsels, X, Y, Z, as I've gone and mentioned. We work with over 60 banks in the world, 70, I think, even now. So ask the questions to your accountant. So how many clients have you done this for? Have you ever seen this before? Is this normal? Ask these questions that you want to ask. You've got AI, use AI to ask the questions that you need to ask, okay? And have you worked with clients who've relocated on tax purposes? That's an interesting thing. Exit plans, exit strategies. We've seen Australia, the UK is pushing towards this, if not already in this territory. We've seen many different variations of this. For example, especially with US residents, it's very complicated, we have gone and seen. But let me be blunt about what's going on here, is you have to really nail, especially in high tax jurisdictions. UAE is a little bit more flexible, right, with position of economic management. But in the UK, they're so tight now, there's no grey area no more. It's this or this. And that's really what you want to be clear on. And that's my message today, guys. I don't want to see anyone unwind entire structures because they've built it wrong from the start. I've seen people with unexpected tax bills. I've heard stories from XYZ. If you actually read the Australian tax code, technically if you have bedlinen and a washing machine or appliances there, that could determine your tax residence. It's little things like this that all come together and come at play here. So again, if you haven't got in contact with us, feel free. We can ask questions anytime. We're essential consultants. We have a team of 6. You might work with me personally, depending on the size of the project, right? But let me just give you a simple framework to, to actually go ahead with it. Keep your domestic account and domestic compliance in place to keep that ticking over and make sure it's domestically all okay. But when it comes to international, probably most likely reach out to a member of our team or somebody else who you really trust, a legal counsel in Guernsey or this, who's dealt with these types of matters before and deals with them every single day. Don't ask someone who does not deal in these structures every single day, because it's simply pointless. You're going to get wrong or informed or scared, essentially. So tax laws change as well. So you have to review these regularly, and that's why we usually charge a small yearly retainer. And we keep the client informed. We tell them about those filings. Essentially, most of our clients, they don't even have time for these filings as such, so we just keep on top of the ball for them, if that makes sense. That's why I've got a team. They manage the yearly stuff, X, Y, Z. We've built all this for the clients. It's all value-based propositions, And again, keep documents of everything, all advice received, decisions made, and the reasoning behind them. If you have a question and you want to show that you took professional advice, you can then go ahead and do so, if that then makes sense. We always advise our clients to then actually go ahead and do this. And when your accountant pushes back, why is he, pushing back on international advice? If this happens, come to them with a structure that's been designed by a specialist. If they're uncomfortable or they don't understand raised concerns, do I have the right accountant here? I see a lot of accountants, I know accountants back in poorer areas of the UK that spend their weekends smoking cannabis, and drinking every day. So at the end of the day, I'd be very wary about some accountants, if that makes sense. I'm not going to mention any names. We've dealt with firms that are completely awful. But generally speaking, the bigger the firm, the better. The more corporate it is, the better accountants they are. I'm really on about those smaller accountants who are maybe 58 years old and simply past their best. They are past their prime time in life. They are low energy, they don't have time to be there, research. They're not interested in the topics that you're bringing to them. So I know this is a bit of a rant, but I've seen it so many times with clients. It was on my video list to make. And again, if you did like the video, please like, comment, subscribe, and let me know if there's any more topics you want to touch on in the future. We have a big list of topics to actually touch. I'm going to record probably around 10, 15 videos, and I'll wait for your questions for the next topics to actually trust. The team has been expanding rapidly at HPT Group. There's now Steph, there's now Jack, new members of the team that have been working. Well, Steph's been with me for a year and a half now, but he's upped his role a lot, grown into the business, and really understands a lot of the clients' needs, X, Y, Z. But other than that, guys, over and out, and I'll see you in the next video. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with some of your friends, family, people who obviously need some help. Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.